This is Doctor Talks, real talk from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.
Welcome back to Reversing Hypertension Naturally. And we are so excited today to really have one of the forefathers of eating a whole food plant-based diet and just really embracing lifestyle medicine in the early days before it even had a name, Dr. Michael Klaper. How are you today?
I'm just fine, Lori. It's great to be with you and your viewers.
Thank you. And today we really wanted to hone in on a topic that I think most of us understand that salt can cause an issue, but even still, I even get some pushback sometimes with people who are hypertensive and still should be aware of the risks. So I just wanted to kind of clarify some of the processes with you, if you wouldn't mind. In particular, when you think about, you know, salt and the hypertension link, how does excessive salt intake contribute to the development of hypertension?
Hi, that's a very important question. The answer can be a bit convoluted. And since we have time to speak at the summit, let me take a big, long wind up as a former ball player here. And so first of all, sodium, it's an amazing atom. And it is an atom. It's in one of the elements that makes up the universe, that makes up the core of the earth. And we have a very primordial relationship with sodium. Of course, its sister atom, chloride, makes up the milieu that is the liquid aspect of our cells. All our chemistry takes place in a watery medium, but it's not pure water. There's a lot of sodium in there. As I said, it's a primordial relationship we have because where did the sodium come from? Well, of course, if you believe in evolution, that life began in the sea when we developed into multi-cell organisms, and then eventually made that epic trek onto land. We took the ocean with us, and it's in the form of our blood circulation and in that the intracellular liquid that's in all our cells. It's a salty solution that we live in, that we depend upon. And we've got a delicate relationship with it. It's because of some of the remarkable properties it has. A solution of sodium chloride happens to be able to convey an electrical current. Well, that's wonderful because we are electrical creatures. Our nerves fire on electrical impulses. Our muscles roll on electrical impulses. And it's that sodium that's in our cells on either side of our cell membrane that allow this electrical phenomenon to happen. And we've got a delicate relationship with sodium, like Goldilocks. You can't have it, we couldn't have the soup too hot or too cold. We can't have too much sodium in our cells. The sodium can't be too concentrated. We would pickle from the inside if that happened. But it can't be too low either. Too much water would enter our cells and we would cease to function. So we need to keep the sodium balance in our body, in our blood, in our cells at a fairly narrow range, similar to the salinity of seawater, and there's no coincidence of that. So over the eons, our body, what became our body, namely the organ known as kidneys that all organs have, they've become very adept at regulating how much sodium is in our blood. It's the kidney's job largely to determine how much sodium to hold on to in our bloodstream, how much to let go of in the urine. And so our healthy kidneys are our safeguards of the right amount of sodium in our bloodstream. And they do a pretty good job of it because sodium out in the wild during our ancient foraging days, 1,000,000 years ago on the African veld there, we spend most of our days foraging for calories, digging up roots and tubers and edible grasses and berries, etc., and occasional carcasses rotting in the sun, I'm sure. But sodium is a fairly rare commodity. Not many plants have that much sodium in them. And so we naturally ate a low sodium diet, and our kidneys had no problem excreting these moderate amounts of sodium out in our urine. Probably high blood pressure wasn't an issue to our ancient Paleolithic ancestors. But welcome to the 21st century. We now use salt profligately. The food manufacturers have understand how seductive salty foods can be. And so now most any processed food, if you read the label, it has some salt in it, sodium chloride. And whether it's the chips, the snack foods that are obvious, the salty French fries at the fast food restaurant, but cheese, you can't make cheese without salt. Unsalted, pretty bland stuff. And so the huge amounts of dairy products, at least as far as cheese go, adds to the salt load. And the restaurant meals, the spaghetti sauce in the Italian restaurant, the soy sauce in the Asian restaurant, tasty, but meanwhile, it adds that level of salt that's coming in. And now what do your kidneys do with after a meal, say, ooh, the amount of sodium in the blood is going up? Not a good thing as far as your kidneys go. Why? Because again, the kidney's job is to keep the salt concentration getting too high. You don't want to pickle your cells from the inside there. And by that, I mean the salt would draw water out of the cells and our cells would shrivel while the sodium atoms pull water to them wherever they are. And you would get an intracellular dehydration if the salt concentration gets too high. So the kidneys sense that salt concentration, blood's going up after a bag of extra large bag of fries and 2 slices of pepperoni pizza. There's a big salt load in the bloodstream. What do the kidneys do? Well, the quickest way to lower the salt concentration is to dilute it out. So how do the kidneys do that? Well, they retain water. Message goes actually from the brain, who also senses too much salt, down to the kidneys. Hey, kidneys, you know that water you were going to excrete in the urine, hold on to it. We need to dilute out all this salt in the bloodstream. That messenger molecule is called antidiuretic hormone, ADH, but it makes us retain water. And it works, and it lowers the salt concentration. Yay, we live to eat another pretzel. But there's a price. Normally, your heart's pumping around about 8 pints of blood. Well, now you're holding on to water that you would have excreted. Now your heart's got to pump around 9 pints of blood. 10 pints. The blood volume goes up when you retain all that water. Well, ask any plumber what adding extra volume does to the pressure in the pipes in any system there. You add more fluid in there, the pressure is going to go up. And so this is the change. And as a long answer to your question, how does salt raise blood pressure? There's a number of mechanisms, but basically the salt concentration goes up, the kidneys retain water to dilute it out. The extra volume is going to raise the sodium, going to raise the blood pressure. But there's other mechanisms involving the level of muscle tone in the arteries. We'll probably talk about those. But in general, salt makes you retain fluid, raises blood pressure.
That's fantastic. And the pressure, when you talk about pipes, asking a plumber, when we moved into this home, we had to repipe our home. It's a 50-year-old home because the pressure from outside was coming in at such a high volume and at such a high rate that it was destroying the pipes in the house, causing little leaks. Anyway, it's a very clear demonstration of how much too much pressure can be damaging. So yeah, absolutely. So that's fantastic. So the next question I'd have for you is, so what is salt sensitivity in the context of hypertension, and how can one determine if they are actually salt sensitive?
Right. Well, we're talking about blood pressure, and you don't want to walk around with high pressure in the system. Why? Because after a while, it's hard on the pump, it's hard on the heart, and the heart starts to thicken and eventually fail. So sustained high blood pressure is hard on the heart. You got congestive heart failure, but it's hard on the kidneys as well. That high pressure slamming into those delicate filter membranes in your kidneys, heartbeat after heartbeat after heartbeat, eventually damages the kidney. It damages the eyes. You start getting hemorrhage in the eye. The system is not meant to run on too high a pressure like the pipes in Dr. Marbus's house. You exceed that pressure, then you damage the system. So this is why we're concerned about it. Your question again?
The salt sensitivity, because some people say they're more sensitive to salt, and some can consume salt and don't have, like, normotensive individual may or may not be able to take salt in and not see, but I'm not sure if that's so true. But anyway, you tell me.
Yes, no, she's right, as she usually is. Those of us who know Dr. Marbus. in that, and it's not going to be any great surprise, given any biological response in a group of human beings, including the human population, you're going to get, as the statisticians tell us, this glorious bell-shaped curve, and most people are going to be in the middle. Most people react with an X amount of elevation of blood pressure to a salt load. But some folks don't react much at all and it can be any number of reasons. Their kidney function, the tremendous elasticity of their arteries, maybe they don't absorb, so whatever it is. Some people are at the tail of the bell-shaped curve out there who don't react much at all. But that, of course, their opposite number is there's a bunch of people who, even with just moderate or small amounts of sodium, whoa, they get a very exaggerated response. And then they, after a salty meal, can certainly walk around pressure to 220 over 110 for hours. And this is not a good idea. Or they're just constantly, due to their daily diet, walking around with pressures 165 over 95 day after day after day. And again, over time, this builds up, and causes damage. So are you a hyper responder or not? Well, there's only one way to find out, of course. And we get around, I guess, the subject of accurate blood pressure measurement. And of all the things we do in medicine, we're measuring blood pressure is one of the more inexact sciences, it seems. What is done is a cuff is placed around the major artery, usually the brachial artery in the upper arm, and a stethoscope is placed that artery as it emerges from the blood pressure cuff. The cuff is inflated to a higher pressure than the pressure that in that artery coming down the arm, and then the pressure is slowly released, and the person measuring pressure is listening to the first time he hears that blood surge through under that cuff. At that point, the pressure, by definition, in the artery is equal to whatever it was reading on the cuff there. That's the systolic pressure. That's the highest pressure that the heart is mustering to make that blood move through the system. This is how the blood pressure is measured. You then keep listening till the sound disappears. That's the second number. That's the diastolic pressure. And this range ideally should be the first number should be no higher than 120, 130 in that area. That second number is when the arteries relax between beats. You want that pressure to drop down well below 90, and the 80s or preferably 70s or lower. Yeah, that's that split second the arteries get to relax. So that's when and what you're looking at, these are the peak and the trough of the pressure waves that the arteries have to deal with as the heart is beating. And you don't want them too high or too low for the reason of Dr. Marvis's pipes there. The sustained pressures that are consistently high are certainly going to set you up for damage to the arteries. As far as measuring it properly, that's really distorted. We are all told, students are told in med school, before you check anybody's blood pressure, be sure they've been sitting in a chair quietly for 5 minutes. Let the heart rate come down, let those arteries relax, get a baseline. But that's so often not what happened. Everybody's in a hurry in the doctor's office. The nurse ushers you in, sits you down, throws a cuff on the arm. Oh, 150 over 90. Anyone tell you have high blood pressure? But all blood pressures go up just with physical activity, just walking across the room. Sitting in a doctor's office generating adrenaline is going to raise your blood pressure. So the blood pressures are notoriously inaccurate in the doctor's office. The best are done at home with your home blood pressure cuff. Again, after you've been sitting quietly, either in bed or in a chair for 5 minutes, think yourself out in a nice summer day in a pasture with blue skies and butterflies for 5 minutes before you hit that button there. Let that pressure come down, and you'll get a fairly decent reading. Readings are different often in the morning than in the late afternoon after a full day of activity there, and you might notice the second pressure is higher or lower. Note it, just write them down. But these are the numbers that your doctor really is interested in. These are the more valid numbers for you, because as you eat a whole food plant-based diet and those arteries relax and that pressure comes down, if you're on blood pressure medications, maybe it's time to start decreasing them or stopping them. And you'll know that pressure consistently going, you're standing up and getting lightheaded and your pressure's 70 over 40. Pick up the phone and call your doctor's office and say, I'm getting lightheaded when I'm standing up, and here's the last few numbers here. Do you think I might want to reduce my medication or maybe stop them? But this is how the process unfolds. So those accurate numbers are important to give to your doctor there. That's how to get the best numbers there.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's so important that they're monitoring at home so carefully and give very strict guidelines, because not only do they do it, but if someone else is eating the food that they're preparing, sometimes I call it positive collateral damage. Basically, when people are eating these healthy foods and unbeknownst to them that they are also going to get better, need monitoring of their medications. So it's really important, the people around you too that are consuming these healthy foods, which leads me to my next question. What are some of the recommendations for effectively reducing salt intake? Like if someone is cooking or going out or traveling, like what are your suggestions for people who are in different circumstances?
Yes, well, as a recovering saltaholic myself, I've become very interested in this issue, and I'm making an effort to entertain my tongue with non-salty flavorings. I love piquant umami flavorings there, and but too much salt is too much salt. So what to do? I've become a big fan of squeezing lemon juice on my greens and my places where I wouldn't think of. It works on baked potatoes and sweet potatoes. It works on strange places there. So see where lemon juice can be entertaining. There's a whole world of balsamic vinegars. We've got quite a collection in our pantry, and they come in all flavors and shapes and sizes there. So try an assortment of those. Those help. Two other things, there are salt substitutes that have, instead of sodium chloride, they have potassium chloride, and they work. And some people don't like the aftertaste. Some people find it really tasty. So you might want to check out some salt substitutes where they have potassium chloride. But you can mix up your own if you get on the internet and put homemade salt substitute recipe. Though there's dozens and dozens of them using all these wonderful herbs, black peppers and oregano and thyme and all these things. You put them in one of these little coffee grinders, and it turns into a lovely powder to sprinkle on your veggies there. So look up some of the recipes for homemade salt substitutes. And then finally, I'm a big fan. I have no stock in their company. I wish I did, but one of my favorites is called Benson's Table Tasty. It's nutritional yeast with some dried herbs, but it tastes salty, but it has very little sodium in it. So I'm a big fan of Benson's. No, I don't make any money off of your sales of their kind of product. So these are things to do, and so really make an effort. And hold the restaurant eating to a minimum. If you have to do it, restaurant food is usually pretty salty. Do the best you can and enjoy the meal and have an extra salad the next day.
Exactly. So, which actually got me to the salt substitute. So, when you were mentioning the potassium chloride, how is that helpful? And, how is the potassium sodium balance helpful? For example, soy miso, even though it has some sodium, but that has more potassium, might be an potential okay substitute in small amounts. I don't know. What would you suggest?
Oh, so much in that excellent question here. This primordial pairing of the sodium chloride atom that makes up table salt and makes up the milieu of our cells and the dissolved salts in it. Well, there's another atom out in the wings here called potassium that has a similar relationship with chloride. Potassium chloride and potassium is a very useful atom in our circulatory system. Our heart muscle depends on normal potassium. All the relaxation of our artery walls depends on potassium. And one of the nice things about a plant-based diet, most plants are rich in potassium. But a little extra potassium often is beneficial as far as lowering blood pressure. It does have the property of relaxing the artery walls. And so it also makes for an interesting salt substitute. Instead of sodium chloride in classic table salt, they pull out the sodium, put in the chloride of the potassium atom, and so now it's potassium chloride. And it tastes fairly salty and it gives you a little hit of potassium. And also, again, it has substituted for the sodium you might have been eating, your popcorn or whatever, where you would use regular salt. So potassium chloride is a very useful type of salt substitute. And again, may have benefits actually in lowering your blood pressure a bit. But all of these are used in tiny amounts here. And become an artist in how little sodium you need to create a salty sensation. And Dr. Marbus mentioned miso. I'm a big miso fan. It's fermented soybeans. It's a paste that you can mix up into gravies and soups and sauces. And I love the taste of miso. But classic miso is fairly rich in sodium. They've now been inching down the sodium content of many of today's modern misos. And now that some of them even have potassium-based miso. And yay, I welcome that. Apparently, according to Dr. Greger, misos are in general, there's something else in the soy paste that seems to prevent big rises in blood pressure despite a bit of a sodium content there. But again, a tablespoon of miso once a week in a soup broth is probably not going to cause great risk to your cardiovascular system. But if you can get the lower sodium version of it, all the better.
Fantastic. So, because a lot of people switch over to these fancy sea salts, and there's still the high risk of high sodium as well, correct?
Absolutely. Salt is salt, even if it comes from the crystal caves in the Himalayas. It's still salt.
Exactly. Salt is salt at the end of the day. It's
Indeed.
just stressed the same. So then when we speak to iodine, because iodine is a really important micronutrient, and many in the developed worlds eat table salt that was iodized, which helped with thyroid function. So any recommendations to kind of go off a little bit of a tangent, but we'll come back on to the salt here in a minute, but for iodine consumption and making sure people are getting what they need?
Yes, Dr. Marbus touches on a true fact of physiology and medical history, and people who don't have enough iodine in their diet develop goiters in their thyroid gland as the thyroid is working overtime to produce thyroid hormone without enough iodine. And there's very dramatic appearance to these folks. And so you want to give your thyroid gland enough iodine, no question. Obviously, the ocean water is full of iodine. And so the fish eaters get plenty of iodine, but we are friends of the fishes and I'll let them off the hook there. So where does the plant eater get iodine? Should be in the soil. It's a soil element. And organic farmers should be the ideal organic farmer, as they enrich their soils with mulches, etc., should be plowing back seaweed back into the soils there and really keep their soils iodine rich. There's other ways to get iodine into the soil, but it should be coming in our, especially root vegetables that take up soil minerals. So carrots and onions and turnips and beets should be good sources of iodine and from healthy soils. But might not be. If they're just commercial vegetables and grown in iodine-poor soil, you may need to look for other sources of iodine. So where else can you look for it? One place, as Dr. Roberts mentioned, is iodized salt. People were eating, back in the 1920s and 30s, they were eating so little iodine-containing foods, people were getting these huge goiters. So they started adding iodine to table salt, and it did take care of the goiter problem. So, and then iodized salt is still around, and it would play a useful role in the life of a vegan who's looking for an iodine source. I think we'll come back to that as far as how to use iodized salt. There are other iodine sources. There are organic sea vegetables you can get. Wakame is that green vegetable in the Japanese restaurants, salads there, and a gob of that on your soup or salad a few times a week will give you the iodine you need. Wakame is another sea vegetable. Arame is another sea vegetable. You can get these and you soak them and throw them into your soup or salad a few times a week, so you can get iodine that way. If you're taking a vegan multivitamin, and many of us are, to ensure we get enough zinc and vitamin D, well, on the label, most of them have 150 micrograms of iodine, and I think that's a good place to get it as well. So finally, those other sources, the sea vegetables and the multivitamin been mentioned. What about iodized salt? I'm all for it because it comes down to the issue of table salt or salt at the table. And I hear today in this low salt world, and not for invalid reasons, people say, "Oh, we got rid of our salt shakers. We don't never salt our food." Actually, that's the one place you've got control over the salt intake there at the Italian restaurant. Nothing you can do about it. It's already in the spaghetti sauce. But at the table, you can decide how much salt to add. You shouldn't be cooking with it. You can add so much salt to boiling water, you don't even taste it. But salt, if you're going to use it, should be added at the table, because very little salt it lands on the surface of the veggies. So when you bite into the corn or into the potato, you get a big salty hit on your tongue for very little actual sodium. Those salt crystals deliver the salty taste without teaspoons of salt being involved. So don't have a problem with salt at the table if it's done in proper amounts. Like the toxicologists tell us, the dose makes the poison. And we're talking about a pinch, literally a pinch of salt on your veggies. That's about an eighth of a teaspoon, a little less than an eighth of a teaspoon. And a pinch of your a pinch of salt on your veggies, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is about 3/8 of a teaspoon. The general recommendation is, 1 teaspoon is about 2,500 milligrams of sodium. So that's less than that, and that's as much as you want to use, but that's all you would really need to use. And that would give you about 50 micrograms of iodine, depending on the actual salt. So if you're going to use a pinch of salt, make it iodized. You can get iodized sea salt actually as well. If you're a big sea salt fan, you get it been iodized. So yes, if you're going to be using salt, hold it to a pinch and let it be iodized. And unless you've got runaway high blood pressure, if you're on 3 medications for blood pressure and it's still 210/120, don't be putting a pinch of salt on your food at all, period. But if you don't, if blood pressure isn't an issue for you, hold it to a pinch at a meal there.
Perfect. No, that makes complete sense. I have one of my newer patients this last week is on 5 blood pressure and still uncontrolled.
Should not be using
My heart is dying right now. So
yeah, you become a lemon juice fan. Yeah.
She's new to the plant-based world, and I'm really excited to see where she might go. But it was like she didn't even understand the medications, what they were for. And she's like, "Well, the cardiologist prescribed." I'm like, "Well, this is why." And so it broke my heart. But anyway, I do want to say thank you, for joining us today, everyone. And I hope you found this conversation insightful and engaging, as Dr. Klaper always is. And if you're a Summit purchaser, stay right here, because we're even about to dig a little bit deeper into the salt conversation. And if you're not, click on the button below or the side and get access to the rest of the conversation. Now, if you're watching this, thank you for being a valuable member of our community, and let's continue. All right, just a few more questions, Dr. Klaper, and I really appreciate you staying with us and answering a few more questions. So, excuse me, when we speak to the amount of salt people should be consuming and educating the public, so what are some of the effective ways we can educate general public or our neighbors or our colleagues about the risk of high salt intake and its relation to hypertension? Where should we begin? Or maybe, speak to your efforts to help educate, young medical students about lifestyle medicine and a plant-based diet, especially.
Oh my, how do we educate society to change its course? Like turning an ocean liner here, because again, the fast food industry have been artistic in their ability to seduce the public taste towards high salt foods. And again, when you bite into that buffalo wing, you don't really taste the salt, but it's loaded with it. And into that cheese, that thick cheese pizza, you don't taste the salt, but it's loaded with it. And we've come to accept that as normal. And so it's quite a habit to break. And of course, this is tied into the bigger issue. The truth is, humanity, and certainly the American public, needs to, as individuals and as a society, make a big evolution of our diet to plant-based foods, to a plant-based food stream for every reason you can imagine. It would clean our arteries and our guts and reduce our chronic disease burden. But we need so much less land to grow our food that the forest would come back. And as the trees grow, they take carbon dioxide out of the air and turn it into solid wood and reverse global warming. It's the only tool we have, most powerful tool we have to reverse global warming. The lights are flashing. Humans, if you want to survive as individuals and you want to survive as a species, evolve your diet to plant-based ones. The era of animal eating is over. That's the message that humanity needs to hear. That's what many of us in the plant-based world are trying to convey. And I'm trying to get under the guise of to the young medical students, you want to heal your patients or you just want to treat their chronic disease? If you want to heal your patients, get them on a plant-based diet and you'll reverse the diseases you're spending all these hours treating here. So I'm telling them, for the sake of becoming better, more powerful physicians who can really heal disease, to educate themselves and adopt a plant-based diet. But I'm also doing it because I know it's a key key passage that our noble profession has to go through. The medical profession is a major bottleneck preventing this change to a plant-based diet in our society. Doctors don't mention nutrition. We don't talk about it. We don't know anything about it. We don't learn about it. So nothing gets said at the visits when it's the treatment that could actually save our patients and help them save their own lives and free themselves from these diseases. But it would make medicine fun again to see these people get healthy. It would save their own medical practices. But the silence, the conspiracy of silence, no one says anything. So the patients remain obese and sick, and doctors remain frustrated, and our societies, continues down towards bankruptcy from medical debt. When none of this has to be, a change to a plant-based diet is essential, and it could be done. What if every doctor at every visit, at the end of the visit, by the way, Joe, by the way, Mary, how's your plant-based diet going? I changed to a plant-based diet 6 months ago. Man, I feel great. How's yours going? You want to see Mr. Smith, a plant-based dietitian down the hall, to talk about your diet? I'll be glad to arrange that for you. What if every doctor said that? It would really change the course of medicine. It would change the course of our society. So you're asking about how do we get people to eat less salt, trying to get them to eat less animals, less to move to a plant-based diet. So the two answers converge here. Sorry to go off on this tangent, but I'm facing the same thing on a larger scale here, as we both are. So what would it take, really? If it would take educating the public, and I'll talk to read books like that Food is Climate by Glenn Mercer, a little book, 60 pages. You can read it in 2 hours, and it'll educate you on the issue. Read a book called Comfortably Unaware by Richard Lander, who makes it very clear that adopting a plant-based diet is our only hope and our most powerful tool. So educate yourself. Then, make your own change, but as far as changing your own diet, set a good example for the people around you. But then elect people who will invoke, we got to break up the logjam in Congress. There are young progressive legislator candidates. The Farm Bill is coming up. We don't want to give more hundreds of billions of dollars to animal industries that just keep the pollution going. So let's elect lawmakers to change the subsidies, to eliminate subsidies, or help the broccoli farmers, help farmers and ranchers transition to some other use of their land. You don't have to run cattle on the land, grow broccoli, grow fruit trees, grow hemp. Pay them to let the forest come back. To help these people transition. It's all doable, but you're asking what would it take? Education, self-transformation, legislation, and then I get that huge marketing machine geared up. What if you had sports celebrities and movie stars and everybody? Oh, I went plant-based 6 months ago and my dunk got better. I'm leading the NBA. What if all these glamorous movie stars and on TV commercials and billboards? You could change this. It's doable. All this is doable. So asking, how can we get people to eat less salt? You could do the salt interest wouldn't be happy, but you could start taking out billboards and TV commercials. And tell the doctors. And there's been campaigns to educate doctors about high salt, the risks of high salt diet. But what if every doctor at every visit said, how's your salt intake? Here's the low salt vegetables that you want to be eating, etc. And then again, in public campaigns, it could be done. But buyer beware, caveat emptor. Now it's eater beware. Caveat eater. Now eater beware, and there's hidden sodium In processed foods, if it comes in a package or a box, it's probably got salt in it. The things that you can identify, like growing in the garden. Oh, there's a tomato, there's a cucumber. They probably don't have a lot of salt. So whole foods are always going to be an island of safety. If salt intake's an issue, keep the food on your plate to recognizable vegetables and fruits that you can call by name, and you'll probably be okay.
Yeah, I always liked I don't recall who actually came up with it, but the saying of if you can read the ingredients on a can and your grandmother would recognize the ingredients, you're probably okay. But if not, put it back. So if you need a
Exactly.
chemical,
Grandmother test. Yeah, I agree. That's a good one.
if you need a chemistry PhD to decipher exactly what's going on. Yeah.
Probably the one he did. You're right.
Exactly. So I love to share further your work that you're doing with medical students. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how maybe people can get involved if they're interested?
Sure. The sad truth is that are screaming from us at us from every angle of medicine, but the powers that be just don't want to listen to it, is that the vast majority of patients that we are seeing in the hospitals and the clinics and private practice offices are not there due to some weird and wonderful infectious disease. The majority of them are sitting in front of us, overweight, hypertensive, diabetic, atherosclerotic, and inflamed from what they're eating, from the standard Western diet they're pouring through their bloodstream every 4 hours, the bacon and eggs for breakfast and the cheeseburger for lunch and the fried chicken for dinner and the ice cream for dessert. That's the toxic food stream that's causing all this inflammation and organ dysfunction. And you get these folks on a whole food plant-based diet, and they get leaner and healthier. The diseases reverse, the inflammation subsides, their joints start working. It's a magical transformation. And every doctor needs to know about this, especially every young doctor really needs to understand the power of plant-based nutrition. And I realized that that's an acupuncture point in the system there. If I can reach the medical students before pharmacosclerosis sets into their brains and they think that drugs and surgery are the only treatment for these illnesses, it's the food. Change that, and you'll save the patient's life. And I'm thinking, this is such an important career-changing message. Somebody should be telling the medical students this. Somebody should tell the medical. And a little voice on my shoulder says, "How about you, doc?" And I realized that the best use of my talents at this point in my career is to go to the medical students and say, listen, these diseases, the high blood pressure, diabetes, clogged artery, these are not etiology unknown. It's the food generally. There's other lifestyle issues, but it's largely the food. And so I said, I give them the lecture I wish someone had given me 50 years ago, called What I Wish I Learned in Medical School About Nutrition. It's on my website. And to give this message to them and tear down the curtain of etiology unknown and empower them to I give them resources to educate themselves about how to be aware of plant-based nutrition once they get out of medical school into practice, where they can practice medicine like they know it should be practiced. So I've been reaching the students with this message. We've established a nonprofit initiative called Moving Medicine Forward that helps me deliver this message to medical students across the country. If people would like to learn more about what we're doing and preferably support us, it takes money to run websites and buy plane tickets, etc. Go to movingmedforward.com, movingmedforward.com. And as reward for sitting through my discourse here on sodium, I will forward to Dr. Marbas the 4-page handout, my healthy living, healthy body plan handout that I give to all my new patients about what to eat and how to live a healthy day there. And so just Dr. Marbas will make that available too. But check out Moving Med Forward, and you'll understand what we're doing, and you could sure use your help. So thanks for letting me talk about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fabulous. I love that you're still passionate after all these years. A lot of people would rather go and sit on the beach and relax, but you're still making changes and still pushing forward. And it's important that we all do and on all aspects of our career. So we appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you. It's the least I can do for this profession. Have been so wonderful to me. It's the least I owe it to our sacred calling here. So thanks for letting me get the word out.
No, absolutely. Definitely appreciate it. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next conversation.
Thank you for tuning in to Doctor Talks. We hope today's episode has enlightened and inspired you on your path to optimal health. Each day is a new opportunity to make choices that empower your well-being. For more insights and strategies, subscribe to our podcast and visit our website, www.drtalks.com. Stay connected, stay healthy, and join us next time on Doctor Talks, real talks from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.